Last lesson here, folks, and we're going to do something that goes against everything that I've taught you throughout all these lessons. I'm going to talk to you about merging and flattening. All right, we've tried to be very non-destructive and very flexible, but I'm going to be very destructive in this video to kind of get a point across that sometimes enough is enough. You don't have to save everything as a layer. If you're comfortable at a certain point in your image, you can flatten it. It's not a bad thing. Lots of people do it. All right, so go ahead and open up the image for this lesson. We're going to do a quick retouch. All right, I'm just going to create a blank layer on top of here. Let's work on the eyes. I'll take a white paintbrush and really quick, I'm just going to paint over the whites of the eyes very, very subtly. I don't think anybody will detect this. Yeah, that's looking good. Nobody's going to spot this one from a mile away, are they? No, just kidding. We're going to come up here, change the blend mode from normal, go down to soft light, and drop the opacity down to 0, and then just build it back up. Okay, you can see here, I'll just build it back up until it looks pretty good, somewhere around 30-35%, and I'm pretty happy with that. So we have our whitening on a blank layer. Do we need this layer? Well, I don't. Okay, for me personally, as much as I love layers and as much as I love the non-destructive workflow, I can't sit here and tell you that if I were working on this photo that I would not flatten at this point, because this layer, it's just an extra thing in my layers palette. I don't need it, and I know I'm not going to want to go back. So I can come up here to the layer menu and go down to flatten image, and it flattens it together. All right, so now that layer's gone, I'm working on one layer again. Let's create another new one. This example, I'm going to paint over the iris here. And right there. I'm going to go change this blend mode from normal to overlay. You can see how that brightens things up. Looks kind of spooky, but again, I'll take it down to 0, and then I'll bring it back up. Okay, brightens those eyes a little bit. And that looks pretty good. Now, at this point, do I need to save this? Well, again, same thing. If you're comfortable with it, and I think that's the main thing here, as you get more comfortable, you'll find that you'll flatten more. All right, so I can flatten, which flattens all layers. If I've got, I've just created a bunch of new layers. If I come up here to layer and I go down to flatten, it flattens everything. If you only have one layer like I have here, you can just go to layer, go down to merge down. It's got a keyboard shortcut, Command or Control E, and I can merge that down into the layer right below it. But that's the whole thing, is it comes to your comfort level. As you do this more, you'll be more comfortable, and you'll know that you'll need to go back less. If you're new to it, maybe you do want to save your layers, so you can always go back. If you're working with a client that you've worked with forever, and you know their tastes, well, do you really need to save the layer? If it's a brand new client, then maybe you want to consider saving more layers in case they do change their mind. So it's really at your discretion. I'm kind of just giving you my workflow, which is I would flatten it. Okay, I'm going to come over here, create another new layer. Let's take the healing brush and just do a little bit of lightening under her eyes here. And we'll drop the opacity, because that lets us get the best of both worlds. Drop it all the way down and then just bring it back up gradually. Okay, so before and after. Once again, do I need to save it? I'm not. I'm pretty happy with it, so I'm going to hit Command E, and that's going to flatten it down. Another example would be sharpening. Let's duplicate the layer, go up here to the filter menu, go down to sharpen, hit it with an unsharp mask. And I'm going to really crank it up just because I know it's harder to see this stuff on the screen through the video. So I'm going to crank it up more than I normally would, but I want to make sure you see the sharpening. So I'll hit OK, and I'll create a layer mask. Now remember, in our masks panel, remember how we can invert that layer mask, go from white to black? And what's that do? It hides everything that's on the mask, or it hides the layer because the mask hides everything. So now all we're seeing is the photo that's underneath. If I take my brush tool, and I set my foreground color to white, now I can come over here and I can paint over the areas that I want to be sharp. As long as I'm painting with white on the mask, you can see we're bringing the sharp parts of the photo back in. And we'll get over the eyes really quick. Now, if I were going to be done here, and if I were done with this image and I were saving it, I'd save it as a PSD file. I might not flatten this point, because this is sharpening, and sharpening can sometimes be device specific. It may work great for the web, and when I go to print, it might look a little soft. So maybe I'll want to sharpen it a little more if I go to print. It's a good idea to consider saving your sharpening layer as a layer. And that way I can come in here, if it looks too soft or it looks too harsh, I can drop the opacity down if it's too harsh. If it's too soft, I can delete it, and I can start over again, and I can add more sharpening to the photo. Since I did use a layer mask, I can do this. I could go to filter, go down to sharpen, hit it with an unsharp mask again, and since I added the mask to it, all it's going to do right now is sharpen the areas of the photo that are not hidden away. Okay, remember, we've got that layer mask on there. So it's only working on the parts of the photo where I want my sharpening to show through. So that's a candidate where you might want to leave your layers intact there, because you might want to change that. Okay? Another one here. Let's jump back. This is an image that we looked at back in lesson 7. Lots of layers inside of it. And do you really need to save them all? Do I need to save the pen and the shadow? Or am I pretty happy with the shadow? If you do this enough times, you'll be pretty happy with your shadows. I'm going to click on one and then just hit Command E on the Mac or Control E on the PC, and that flattens those together. So now that pen and that shadow are all one layer. Same thing here. You've got the butterfly, the layer below it. Do you really need both of these layers? I'm going to flatten them. We've got the text. We've got this shiny overlay that was over the text. Do I need all those? We'll come in there and we'll flatten those together. I'm just hitting Command E on the Mac or Control E on the PC. And what it does in the end, it just helps you manage your layers more easily. Because sometimes when you do have a lot of layers, it gets difficult to manage. But at the same time, not only is it difficult to manage a lot of layers, Photoshop starts to run slower. The more layers you add, the more things Photoshop needs to keep track of, and the slower that it can start to run. So it's a good idea to at least consider flattening your layers or consider merging some layers together. It's a comfort level thing. I totally get it, but I can't sit here and tell you that I never flatten, because I do. I flatten a lot. All right. And I think what it comes down to is balance. I know that I can work in a flexible, non-destructive way, and we learned that through all these videos. But I thought flattening and merging was a good way to finish things off here, because if you're ever wondering, is it easier to just work on one layer sometimes? Yeah, sometimes it is, and it's fine. After you know what you can do, and after you know that you can be flexible and non-destructive, it's good to know that when you want to, you can go in there and start to flatten your layers and start to merge some of them together.